are bold, you are fearless, you are radiant. It's time to unlock the diamond from within. BFF, we rise above, stronger together, we shine with love. Faith unshaken, hearts on fire, fearless souls, we're reaching high.
Hello, and welcome back to another episode of the BFF Empowerment Podcast. I am your host, Black Diamond, and I hope you guys are ready for a good, empowering episode this week. So, before we get into the episode, let's do our midweek check in.
What's going on? What's happening? Time for the midweek check-in. What's going on? What's happening? Time for the midweek check-in.
All right. Basically, I almost didn't do an episode this week, guys. I have been suffering from a severe toothache for the past 2 weeks that has been so excruciating. I swear it is worse than childbirth. I don't even remember the pain of childbirth. That is how bad this toothache is. But I am here. I'm ready to motivate and empower you women out there listening. So I'm here, suffering and all, but I am here. So let's see, what have I been up to this week outside of the toothache? Um, so I did do my presentation at the job. Everybody loved it. I am actually scheduled to do another presentation in August for our Enable Plus diversity network that I'm a part of through my job. So there are different diversity networks like Women's Network, there's the Black Experience Network, there's LGBTQ, there's veterans. So we have different diversity networks. And so I belong to the Enable Plus, which is disability network. So I'll be doing a presentation on basically what I do every day in my job, kind of sharing a little bit about me, my story, my journey. So I'm excited about that. My manager um wants me to participate in that and kind of spotlight for disability. Um, Also, let's see, I am at the tail end of finishing my certification for my women empowerment life coaching. Currently developing my first course. So I'm ready to share that with you guys. Um, Let's see. Other than that, yeah, I've been focusing on definitely spreading the word about my new album that is out now. Writing on the Wall is doing really well. People are loving the vibe, the summer vibe. A lot of the songs are more so give you like 90s feel, R&B, because that's the type of music that I'm into. That's my era of where I feel music was good. So definitely check that out on any of the major music platforms that you listen to music, whether it's Apple Music, Spotify, wherever you listen to music, you can find my new album under my artist name, Soulful Sai, and that's SAI. And outside of that, I've been celebrating Disability Pride Month because July is Disability Pride Month. So I've been sharing my story a lot on social media, getting a lot of shares, likes, comments, people, just loving the inspiration, the motivation behind my story and who I am and why I do what I do. So outside of that, that is my midweek check-in. All right, guys. So initially, I had a different topic planned to talk about today, but um, something about what I saw a story on Facebook. When I was scrolling on Facebook, I decided to switch gears a little bit because it is Disability Pride Awareness Month, and also it's just so sad to know that we are in the year of 2025 and despicable things still happen to people, blind people in particular, when it comes to being a parent. So I was scrolling on Facebook, and once again, I saw another story where a child was taken away from his mother simply because she was blind. Not that she was abusing the child, not that the child was neglected, nothing like that. Simply, the judge felt like she was not capable of mothering her child because she couldn't see. He saw her as a danger to her child because she couldn't see. And it is so sad. Like, I'm so tired of seeing stories like this. Like, this is just ridiculous. I just don't understand society. Like, why are things still so backwards when it comes to people with disabilities being parents? I almost had the same situation happen to me. My son, he's 6.5, almost 7 years old. He's thriving. I've been a single mom since before he was born. So let me give you guys a little backstory on how that happened. So my son's dad, he was in the military. Um, and so we met. I fell hard, we were dating. We were friends at first, getting to know each other, and then we decided to start dating. So we had only been dating about 3 months before I found out I was pregnant. And I was in denial about it at first because I had so much going on in my life. I was just at the point where I was starting my, in-home publishing company. I was wanting to, branch out from just publishing myself. I wanted to publish other, authors. So I was expanding that. I was on the verge of, finishing up the development of my natural skincare line. So for me at that time, having a baby was just not in my plans at all, and so the shock of finding out that I was pregnant, it bothered me. And when I told my son's dad, I was crying literally in the doctor's office, crying my eyes out when they finally was like, "Yeah, you're pregnant. You're 7 weeks." And I had started feeling sick um like a couple of weeks before that. Like, I just noticed, when I worked out, I was getting tired, I was getting nauseous, and I thought maybe I was just like overworking myself, like maybe doing too much. So I would like take a break and drink water, I would feel better. So I'm like, okay, cool. Just, keep going. But then I started noticing smells would like make me feel really sick. And I'm just like, I don't understand what is going on. And so something just told me to take a pregnancy test. And I didn't want to. But eventually I did. I ended up going on, I think I went to Amazon, got the blue digital test, took the test. It said positive, pregnant. I'm like, no, there's no way. There's no way. I was, I used protection. I was careful. We did not have unprotected sex. So how am I pregnant? So I took another test like the next day. Same thing. Came back pregnant. I'm like, okay, no, this is just, it can't be. By this time, my son's dad was being deployed. So I'm kind of like, oh my gosh, like, what am I going to do? So my friend at the time, I finally told her, I was like, I think I'm pregnant. And at first, she was actually the one that told me. She was like, I think you're pregnant. I'm like, no, I'm not. There's no way. I'm not pregnant. What are you talking about? She was like, okay, you're in denial, but you're pregnant. But so eventually I had no choice but to admit yes. So I went to the doctor, got the blood test. They told me yes, I was pregnant. And like my world just collapsed. I'm like, this is just not the time. This is not the right time for me to have a baby. Like, I'm on the cusp of, branching and expanding my business, and I can't do this right now. And so I called my son's dad while I was at the doctor's office, and I was like, I'm pregnant. And you know what this man did? He started laughing. And I'm sitting here like with my feeling like my world is just crumbling around me, and he's laughing like something's funny. And I'm like, what's so funny? And he's like, oh, I already knew you were pregnant. And I'm like, what? He was like, yeah, I already knew you was. I was just waiting for you to tell me. I'm like, what do you, excuse me, had to sneeze. I was like, what do you mean? So he proceeds to tell me that he poked holes in the condom to get me pregnant on purpose. It was intentional. So normally, you would hear stories about women trapping men with babies, but men do it too, and he was the prime example. So he intentionally got me pregnant against my will. So it wasn't like I was just out here recklessly having unprotected sex and whoops, oh, we're pregnant. No, I did what I was supposed to do. So my doctor had taken me off of birth control. I had been on birth control basically since I was 18 years old. And so, because of all the birth control, it was causing me to have abnormal pap smears. So, basically, my pap smears were coming back as if I had cervical cancer. And so, my doctors, told me to stop, taking the birth control because they wanted to run more tests and things like that to try to see why this was happening. So basically, my alternative to birth control or having, was to have protected sex with condoms. So now, on top of me finding out that I'm pregnant, to find out that this person intentionally got me pregnant without my knowledge, without my consent, was a whole different ballgame. So now I'm just like, I don't know what to do. He's laughing. He was like, oh, come to find out he was a narcissist, and, he just had a lot of growing up to do, a lot of things. And so he was like, I bet you're not going to be able to do this, and I bet you're not going to. So basically, he got me pregnant because he wanted to throw a monkey wrench in the plans that I had. And so, of course, that relationship ended that day I found out I was pregnant. Because you took away my choice. I felt like I was sexually assaulted all over again because that's basically what it boiled down to. You took away my choice when I wanted to have a child and how I wanted to have a child. He always knew that I wanted children, but I was not planning to have any children until I was married. I didn't want to be a single mom. I didn't want to be a person having children out of wedlock. I wanted to be married before I had kids. And he knew that from the start of our relationship. But I digress. So, after finding out, eventually, the excitement came after the whole, just emotional roller coaster of what am I going to do? Like, I don't want to be a single mom. I just didn't plan on doing this by myself. So I put on my bootstraps and I'm like everything else I've had to endure in life, I got to put my big girl panties on and do it. Getting rid of my child was not an option. So having an abortion was not an option. Giving my child up for adoption was not an option. So my only option was to prepare for this new life that I was bringing into this world. And I did that. From that day forward, every paycheck I got, I went and bought diapers. I bought everything that I would need for my child. Throughout my pregnancy, that was the most loneliest that I felt because I went through all the experiences of childbirth and feeling the child kick and them growing. I tracked everything on Baby Center and all of that, so I got to experience the size and the growth of the baby. But I had no one by my side. to go through these experiences with me, and that's not what I wanted. And so forward flash, time for me to give birth. It was an emergency situation to where I developed a really bad case of preeclampsia. So I had to be induced to have my son to save both of our lives. So it became a life or death situation to where I could not go the full 40 weeks to give birth to him. So he had to be taken early. So throughout my pregnancy, I was just doing this on my own. Like I had a very symptom-free pregnancy, so to find out that I was in a life or death situation on my 37th week checkup was just eye-opening. And I'm like, what? Like, really? Like, I feel fine. So apparently I had a really bad case of preeclampsia, like that just hit overnight. And because of that, they said I had to be induced in order to save my son's life and also to save my life because my blood pressure just would not stop rising. And from what the doctors were telling me, I actually should not have been having a whole conversation with them. I should have been in a coma. How high my blood pressure was. I should have been passed out, just gone. But I was just like, what do you mean? I feel fine. Like, I thought I was just going to get a ultrasound and I was going to go right back to work. Like, that was my plan. I already had my hospital bag packed and ready, which I had just finished packing it that morning because of, all the baby books and websites. They were like, oh, have your hospital bag packed, sitting by the door, once you reach 37 weeks. So that's what I did. And that morning, I just had sat my bag there by the door, not realizing that I was actually going to need it. And so I was induced. I was in labor for 24 hours. Um, and my beautiful baby boy came from that. Um, It took me about 30 minutes to push. I was a first time mom, but it only took me 30 minutes, 3 pushes, and he was here. So I was looking like, okay, yeah, I could do this again. Like, this is not what I thought it was going to be. But apparently it was more damage than I thought. So the doctors were like, if apparently I was bleeding a lot. And so they were like, if they couldn't get the bleeding to stop, then I would have to have a blood transfusion. I guess eventually the bleeding did stop, so I ended up not needing the blood transfusion. But they still couldn't get my blood pressure under control. So they had to put me on blood pressure medication. And I've always prided myself, on being healthy and not having any kind of, condition. So I'm like, I don't have high blood pressure. This is, not normal for me. They were like, oh no, it's just temporary, it's just something that happens, once after you have the baby, you do um your checkup and everything, and if everything's fine, then yeah, we'll take you off the medicine. So this is where my story gets to where the main topic of this episode today is about is children being taken away from parents just because they're blind. So, like I said, I just pushed out a 6 pound, 4 ounce baby. Haven't even had a chance to recover yet. They took my baby, was cleaning him up and everything. Got to do the little snuggles and all of that first time they took him to do all his measurements and everything. So while I'm being wheeled to my room where I'm going to be staying for the next couple of days, to finish healing and recovering, I have a nurse. And so my nurse is like, oh, your baby is beautiful, and da 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 da. I'm like, okay, yeah, I felt his face. I knew he looked like me. He had my same facial features, structures, everything. So I knew without anybody telling me that my son looked like me. And to this day, he's still my twin. My a boy or male version of me. Um, and so she was of some type of Caribbean, or she had an accent. So she was either Haitian, African, or Jamaican, or, from some Caribbean island. So she was a black woman, and she just started grilling me, asking me all of these questions. Where's the father? I'm like, he's not here. Who's gonna help you with the baby? Nobody? How are you gonna know when, he poops? You can't see. I'm like, okay. And at first, I'm answering her questions, but then I'm starting to get really annoyed because I could tell by her tone and by the questions that she's asking, she's one of the most ignorant people, out there with their backwards thinking. And so she's just asking me all these. I said, ma'am, I'm not the first blind woman to have a child. I'm not going to be the last. I will figure it out just like any other first time mom does. Nobody has all the answers when they have a child, especially their first or its fifth. It doesn't matter. All children are different. Every birth is different. Every child is different. So I'm going to have to figure it out just like anybody else does. So stop asking me these questions. Like I'm some dummy or something. Yes, no. And in my experience, I had never changed a baby, held a baby, fed a baby, nothing. So all of this is brand new to me. But I'm like, I'll figure it out like I do everything else. What's the big deal? So, they bring my baby back and we start to bonding and I'm, trying to breastfeed him and, we're just so my son had some complications as well. He was severely jaundiced. So he had some issues going on with his breathing and things like that. So we both ended up staying in the hospital for about a week. They wouldn't let him go home until his tests and stuff came back normal, which it took forever. They wouldn't let me go home because they still couldn't get my blood pressure under control. So we both ended up staying in the hospital. So a friend of mine, and her husband was there, when I had the baby and stuff like that. So that was all good. So I'm thinking, okay, cool, life is great. I'm about to just start this new journey. The next day, I get a knock on the door in my hospital room, and a man walks in and was like, he's from CPS. And I'm like, what? CPS? Like, what? What is going on? He says, well, we received an anonymous call about a you know a person who was incapable of taking care of their child, that the child needed to be taken away. And I'm like, and I started laughing. And my immediate reaction was to start laughing. I was angry, but laughter is the emotion that I expressed. And he was like, why are you laughing? And I'm like, I'm not surprised. I was like, in a way, I kind of already expected this. And he was like, what do you mean? I said, because I'm blind. I'm single. There's no dad. Society has not caught up to society, the new society. So I said, I'm not surprised that you were called because I'm blind and I just gave birth to a child. What should be the happiest moment of my life right now is being interrupted because of someone else's ignorance. I said, so go ahead and ask me your questions. Go ahead and set up your home visits and whatever you feel like you need to do to prove that I am a capable parent since I can't see. So he was like, well, based on what I've seen so far and what I've heard from the nurses and everything that I've already talked to, you seem to be doing fine. He was like, but unfortunately, because we were called, we have to investigate. And I'm like, okay. So you're wasting your time with me because you were called. When there's children out here who are really being neglected, really being abused, really, just not having the full attention and love and care that they deserve because someone else's ignorance, you're bothering me. Okay. So he starts asking me all these questions about where do I work and how am I going to take care of the child and da 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 da. And I'm like, sir, I work full time. I've always worked. I've been blind since I was 15 years old, but I've worked since I was 17 years old. I've never let my blindness stop me from doing whatever it is I want to do in life. I said, yes, I'm a single mom. Yes, I'm doing this on my own, but I'm more than well prepared to do this on my own. So, he was like, oh, I'm going to have to come to talk to you, and, we're going to have to do home visits. I'm like, okay, sure. So I finished my stint in the hospital and I come home with my child. Like I said, I'm new to this. Never held a baby, never fed a baby, no experience whatsoever. So I come home and, start day one of being a mom. I had no help, no one to show me anything. So, of course, dad's not around because he tried to give me an ultimatum, either be with him or be a single mom. And I said, well, I guess I'll be a single mom. Goodbye. So I get home, I'm with my baby and, I'm just sitting there like, what am I going to do? Like I am responsible for this little human. Like this little person came from me and now it's time for me to take care of him. So I do what I was doing in the hospital. I feed him, at this point, he's not latching, so I'm having to pump. Um, so set up my pumping schedule and things like that, pumping machines and all of that. So, I would say probably day 5 is when my reality really started sinking in, and I started doubting myself. I had this brief moment of awareness that I was blind and that this was too much for me. And I sat there and I cried that night while I was holding my son while he was sleeping, and I said, I can't do this. This is too hard. I don't think I'm able to do this. And it was more so not that I didn't think I could do it. It was the fact that I didn't want it to do it by myself. This wasn't how I planned to do it. So I ended up just crying. And I did it for about 5 minutes. And then something told me, girl, get yourself together. Stop crying. You got this. This little boy needs you. You're all he has. So you do what you need to do to take care of him. And so I wiped my tears that night and I got up and I said, I will never cry over this ever again. And I meant that. I said, this is a new situation, this is a new experience, but I got to do what I have to do because this little boy is counting on me. And so the CPS worker, he would come and do his visits and he would watch me literally change my child, feed him, bathe him. He wanted to see that I could do everything that I was supposed to do for my child. He came to my house, he was like, wow, like you're more than prepared. I literally had my son's closet was full of diapers, wipes, clothes. Like I literally had enough stuff to where I didn't have to start buying stuff for him until he was about 8, 9 months old. That's how much stuff I had collected over the time of my pregnancy because every paycheck I made sure I bought what he needed. His bedroom was full. He had a full nursery, even though he didn't even sleep in it. He slept in my bedroom. I had everything my child needed with no help from anyone. And I showed him, I said, yes, this is new to me, but as you can see, I'm more than capable of taking care of my child. And so eventually he was like, I'm just so sorry that I had to interrupt your life like this in your moment. He was like, but I had to do it because a case was opened and an accusation was made. He was like, but I can see based on my, coming here and seeing you and doing these home visits that you're more than capable of taking care of the child. So I'm going to close your case. And he did. And when I finally got the paperwork, which I still have the paperwork to this day, this was back in 2019. I still have that paper because I wanted to keep that as a reminder of how society is still so backwards. But When I ended up reading the documents, the paper specifically said a case was opened on me due to suspicion of dependency. I'm like, what does that mean? What does that mean? So you mean to tell me the only reason why CPS was called on me because I'm blind? That's it. No other reason. I haven't exhibited any other signs, symptoms, neglect, abuse, none of that. Simply because I'm blind is the reason why a case was opened on me. And that it hurt. It really did hurt to know that society still thinks so lowly of a person who is blind, that you feel that because we can't see that we're incapable of doing anything, including taking care of children. I have been my son's best advocate since he was born. I have been his only advocate. My son is special needs and he's had struggles since he was born. And I have been the one that has had to speak up not only for myself, but to speak up for him when he can't speak for himself. So I went from some of the conditions my son was born with was, of course, he was very jaundiced. So he didn't get out of the jaundice stage until he was about 2 months old, which is severely long, but that was just his case. So also my son was born with sleep apnea, which is a rare condition for a baby to be born with, but in a lot of cases, male children can be born with sleep apnea. And then, of course, I found out later that his dad also had the same condition. So a lot of what my son has went through and is going through is hereditary. And that was why it was also important for me to know who and plan when I had a child because I wanted to know what I was up against. And because I did not have a choice in the matter on who I had a child with, I found out all of these medical things later. So basically my son would stop breathing in the middle of the night. Whenever he would go to sleep, he would stop breathing. So I constantly had to monitor his breathing. I had to have an alert. They sent us home with the like what is it called? Like a little thing that would alert me to when he would stop breathing. So my son had to be a belly baby. He could not sleep on his back because if he did, he would choke on his own saliva while sleeping. So he had to sleep on his belly, which, of course, those of you out there who know, being a mother, that's the one thing they tell you do not let your children sleep on their stomach because they can suffocate. So I had to worry about my son suffocating. So I had to constantly check on him all the time. So that meant no sleep for me. I was up all the time, having to constantly monitor him to make sure that he was breathing. So not only that, that went from, oof, yeah. So, I was not only that, I'm a single mom, so I'm doing all this on my own. Not only that, I'm having to go back to work at when my son is 7 weeks old. I never wanted, excuse me, to have to go to work that with my child being that young. But because I was the only source of income and the only support, I had no choice. So I had to put my child and trust my 7 week old with strangers, people he didn't know, people I really didn't know, because I had to put him in daycare. And so from then on, it was just one thing after the next, after the next, medically that I had to deal with my son. He also had a condition where um they were testing him for like a seizure disorder because he would do this thing with shaking his head. And so they wanted to make sure that there wasn't a seizure disorder, so he had to go to a neurologist and get, just it was a lot of doctor's appointments in his first 2 years of life. Then come to find out, my son, he was born severely bow-legged and pigeon-toed. I am pigeon-toed. His father is bow-legged. So he ended up with both. So that meant he was delayed in his gross motor skills as far as sitting up, crawling, all of those things. So 6 months, I'm noticing, okay, he's not, he's trying to do these things, but he's struggling. He's literally grunting and groaning and just exhausting himself, trying to accomplish the normal milestones that babies accomplish at his age. And so I told his doctor, I was like, something's wrong. Like, I don't understand why he's not able to do. And, I was always, oh, you're a first time mom, kids do this at their own rate, yada, yada, yada. And I'm like, no, there's something wrong. I said, because it's not that he's not trying to do these things that he should be doing at this or that age. He's attempting, but he is struggling. And so they were like, oh, no, just wait a couple of more months. And if he's not doing it, then, we'll look into it. So 8 months, 9 months, he's not rolling over. He's not sitting up. He's not crawling. He's not doing anything. He's attempting to do these things, but he's still not able to do them. And I go back and I'm like, okay, I've waited. Nothing's happening. I need someone to do something. And I was like, okay, well, we'll go ahead and evaluate him and, we'll see what's going on. They did their test and their evaluation. Oh, yeah, he is, behind. He is delayed. Like, this isn't normal. And this, and I'm like, okay, I already knew that. But, okay, you're finally catching on that I pay attention to these things. I'm very, very in tune with my child. So I know, what he should and should not be doing. And he's just not doing it. And it's not that he's not doing it, he's trying, he just can't. So at 11 months old, he still was not rolling over on his own. He still was not crawling because everything dealing with his legs, he was not able to do. And it was because he couldn't control his legs. His legs just had minds of their own. And I used to always, I used to joke at him and call him squiggly legs. I said, his legs didn't know what direction they wanted to go in. And so finally they said, okay, we're going to get him into, what is it called? Like an early development, program. So that's when physical therapy started because he was not going to be walking when he was supposed to be walking. We already knew that. He couldn't even crawl or roll over. So physical therapy started. Then, unfortunately, COVID hit. So physical therapy had to stop. At least in person, it had to stop. So then I had to step in and act as his physical therapist. I have no professional experience, no certifications, no anything. So I, as his mom, simply because I was his mom, had to step in to be his physical therapist. So I was out buying all kinds of equipment and just things to have at home so that I could work with him to help him catch up to where he needed to be. I'm working all day long, coming home, having to not only to take care of him, but to act as his therapist. So I was buying, all the different things for him to climb on to help strengthen his legs. And then it was just a lot. And I was dealing with it all on my own. No one there to help. So then leg braces came into play. So when he was 14 months old, they finally decided to put leg braces on him. Now, my insurance did not cover leg braces, so I had to, out of pocket, pay thousands of dollars for him to get leg braces. Once again, still, I'm doing all of this on my own. No one there to help me. Now, my son is 14 months old. Me, as a blind mom, I'm still doing all of this on my own. No help from anybody. So we do the leg braces. They come and fit him. They do. So he had two sets of leg braces. He had ones from when he was 14 months old till he was about not quite two. And I had to work with him. I had to instruct the daycare that they had to work with him because they would take the leg braces off because they said, oh, they made him uncomfortable. And I said, well, he needs them. How is he going to walk if he's not wearing the braces? Yes, it's going to be uncomfortable for him, but you're the adult. You need to help him. And so eventually, after the second set of braces, my son started walking on his second birthday. And that was like the proudest moment for me. Not only did his legs straighten out, but he was able to start walking. And at 6.5, almost 7 years old now, you can't even tell he was ever delayed in walking. He's still bow-legged, but he's just not as bad as he was. So the braces did help to straighten out his leg. He's no longer pigeon-toed, but he's still bow-legged. He still, even to this day, still has some issues with his, like, because one of his legs is more bowed than the other, so he has some strength issues in one of his legs. So that was one hurdle I had to get over. So then that hurdle went to the behavioral hurdles. So at about 3, I started noticing something was off about my son. Like, he went from speaking clearly to stuttering. And at first, it was subtle stuttering. Like, I thought, maybe, okay, every now, but then it went from every now and then to all the time. He was having issues with getting his words out. So I'm like, I don't know what happened. He went from speaking clear sentence, because my son has always been very verbal and very, his speech and his intellect has always been more advanced for his age. And people have always said that about children who have blind parents, because they have to learn verbal skills more so than visual skills, because of our inability to see, that their verbal communication skills are a lot stronger. And yeah, my son has always been able to very well articulate himself. And so I noticed, yeah, he started struggling with communicating. He started stuttering, and and I'm just like, what happened? Like, and it's like at 3 years old, he changed into a different person. The aggression, the violence, the outburst, the tantrum. It's like my son was a very quiet child. Like, he rarely cried. When he was a baby, he only cried really when he was hungry or he was sleepy. And he had different ways of showing me that he needed these things. Like, when he was hungry, he would take his mouth and like rub it on mine, like, and that was an indication that he wanted to eat. And when he was sleepy, he would take his, like, where his eyes are, and rub them on my eyes, and that was his way of communicating that he was sleepy. And if I wasn't getting it, then he would do it like even faster, like rapidly. Like, and I'm like, okay, 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 I get it, I understand. So it was so cute. Like, that was just his way of somehow developing his own way of letting me, his blind mom, know what his needs were. And so from 3 years old, I started suspecting that he was on the spectrum. Because things with him, just he changed, and I just couldn't understand, what was going on with him. My son stayed sick a lot. He was very sickly, and it got so stressful that I felt like I was in danger of losing my job. So I ended up leaving my job that I had been at for 11 years, 11 and a half years. So, me as a mother, I sacrificed my job to stay at home with my son to nurse him back to health. Because no matter what I did, I would keep him out of school for a couple of days, get him back. Soon as he would go back to school, he would get sick again. And it was just all over, over and over again. And it was just so stressful because he had a really weak immune system. And so he caught everything, everything under the sun. I mean, he had hands, foot, and mouth. He would have, and I had never even heard of it. I was like, what the heck is hand, foot, and mouth? Um, he ended up with every cold, every flu, just everything that kids can get, he had. And so he was just constantly sick all the time. And I just couldn't take it anymore. So I was like, you know what? I have to do what I have to do for my child, because at the end of the day, this job don't care anything about my child. If I lose my child, they're not going to care. They're going to give me 3 days to grieve and send me on my way. Expect me to be here at work. So my child's life is more important than this job. So I ended up leaving my job and I stayed at home with him, mm, until basically he went to pre-K. So a year and a half, basically, I stayed at home with him, nursed him back to health. I actually homeschooled him. So when he actually did go to pre-K, he was well advanced. And so he was bored with the work because he knew it already. And so those are just some of the things I've had to do. And to this day, my son, he's almost 7, he's thriving, and he has a blind mom. He has never been neglected. He's never been abused. He's never not had because I was blind. His life has not been any different from any child outside of the fact that his mom can't see. He's always been involved in sports. He's played soccer. He's done all the different things that kids who don't have a blind parent have done. So he hasn't missed out on anything because I'm blind. So I just don't understand why society still feels the need to think that someone who is blind is incapable of being a parent. Some people are, but it's not even just the fact that they're blind. That's just because they lack skills to even take care of themselves. But there are people out here who don't have a physical disability or a visual disability or any disability at all, but they still have their kids. They're actually abusing and neglecting their children, but they still get to keep their kids because they can see. Like when my mother was abusing me and my siblings, nobody stepped in and said, "Oh no, we're gonna take these kids away because you're starving them, you're beating them, you're torturing them." No, we stayed and had to suffer through all of that. Why? Because my mom could see. Like I just don't get it. Like it's so disheartening to know that in this day and age, your kids can simply be taken away from you because you can't see. And I was almost that person. And I know that there's a lot of blind and visually impaired people out here who choose not to have children because of that fear. I've known people who have had their children taken away simply because they can't see, and either their kids would get given back to them after a few months or not at all. And I was almost one of those people, but I have been my son's advocate since he was born, through all of his illnesses, all of his conditions. My son has ADHD. He has ODD. Um he's on the spectrum. So he has a lot of conditions. And you know what? For the past 7 years, I've been the one supporting him. I've been the one taking him to therapy, taking him to doctors, taking him to all of these things on my own. Nobody has stepped in and said, "Oh, we'll help." I had people when I was pregnant with him. "Oh, don't worry, you're not going to be doing this alone, da 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 da." But I've done it for the past almost 7 years by myself. So I don't believe that because someone is blind that they're incapable of being a parent. And I feel like society needs to stop with that narrative. It is old, it's outdated. Like, let people be parents, let people live and take care of their children. If there's a serious neglect, there's a serious, visual abuse, there's signs that these children are not thriving or are not being taken care of, then sure, but not off the strength of the fact that they can't see. That's unfair. That is not right. And of course, I know it doesn't, me one person saying this doesn't make a difference. It's not going to change anything, but this has to stop. Like this I just don't understand it. And it hurts to know that you have to have this fear of not wanting to be a parent because of your child may get taken away from you. Now, my significant other and I are planning for a child later on this year. I already know my experience is going to be a whole lot different. Not only the fact that I'm older, but I have my partner now. So I have someone that's going to be there throughout the process, throughout the pregnancy, throughout me giving birth. So I'm probably more than likely not going to deal with the whole discrimination and CPS being called because I'm blind and all of that. But it shouldn't come to that. I shouldn't have to, worry that because I'm blind, is somebody going to call CPS on me because I had a child? Like, I just don't get it. Like, if you don't know what it's like to be blind or visually impaired, like, everything can be adapted. Like, when it came to me measuring out milk and doing, I found ways to do that to make it accessible for me. I would take a knife and put like little notches in the bottles because, of course, those numbers were either written on or they were raised, but they still weren't like, where you could feel them to read them. So I created ways. I bought like talking kitchen scale, and that's how I would measure out my milk, to make sure he was getting the right amount of milk. There was just, and when it came to wiping him, I would just use however many wipes it took till I felt like it was clean. He was clean, so whether it was 6, 7, however many wipes, I just made sure I invested in wipes. My son has eczema, severe eczema. He's had that since he was born. I've always made sure that his skin was always moisturized, his medicated lotions, I've always bent over backwards because I love my child. Like, I could not see myself without my son. And if I knew that someone would take him away from me simply because I'm blind, when he's thriving, you can look at him and tell that he's being taken care of. Like, I don't know what I would do if that were to become my reality. And people comment all the time how smart he is, how handsome he is, how this and that. And I've done that. I done that. Nobody else can take credit for that. I've done that. He's well advanced beyond his almost 7 years old because I put in the effort. I put in the time with him and work with him and help him. And I find ways to adapt things so that he's able to learn and I'm able to help him to learn. I'm not dependent on nobody. No one can say that, oh, well, I've had to do this for her son. I've had to do. No. And I'm a blind parent, a blind single parent, and I've done it on my own. I go to his school. I meet with his teachers. I'm very involved in everything that comes to his education, everything that comes to him. I'm very hands-on and involved with. You have parents out here who don't do that. Who couldn't tell you what grades their kids are making in school, or when's the last time their kid ate, or what clothes their kids are wearing because they're not even involved. They don't know anything. So to simply label a mother or a father as unfit simply because they can't see is ridiculous. It's crazy. And so this month is Disability Pride Month, but every day when you're disabled is Disability Pride Month. Like, I just want this to stop. Like, I hate seeing these stories about people, families being ripped apart because society still deems a person who is blind as bottom of the dirt, bottom feeders. Like, we're just not human. We're just the lowest of lowest. And that is so disheartening, so sad. And this day and age that you can't freely by choice have a family because the fear of somebody's going to discriminate against you because you can't see, so you choose not to reproduce, you choose not to have a child. So guys, I know I've been on my soapbox today, but this really, I just really felt like this needed to be said. I felt like this episode really, because I'm pretty sure there's someone out there listening who's had their child taken away from them simply because they were blind, or if they've chosen not to have a child because of the fear of their child being taken away from them. So I just want to let you guys out there know who are listening. I see you. I'm proud of you. Keep doing what you're doing. Don't let society dictate you being a parent. If you want to have a child, but make sure you can support that child. You're not going to have all the answers. No one does, whether you can see or not. But that shouldn't be the deciding factor on whether or not you want to be a parent. Do what you feel like you have to do to not only advocate for yourself, but your children. Because children deserve parents who love them, who care about them, and who will fight for them. Fight for your child and your children just like you would fight for yourself. And if you're not willing to fight for yourself, you have to start. Because no one else can fight your battles for you but you. You have to be willing to fight. Things are never going to change if you just lay down and just take it. Well, they said I can't have kids because I can't see, so I'm not going to have none. Now, if that's a personal choice, if you decide on your own, you know what, I don't want to be a parent, that's fine. That is totally fine. Not everybody wants to be a parent. But if that is your desire to be a parent, don't let society dictate whether or not you can be a parent. If you can take care of yourself, you can take care of a child. I'm never going to allow anyone to dictate that for me. So I have my 6-year old, I have my two bonus daughters, and we will be having baby number 4 later on this year, early into next year. And I'm not going to be afraid to have a child because of society's stigmas. So, guys, thank you so much for listening. Be sure to follow the podcast on all major podcasting platforms. Also, visit our website at bffempowermentpodcast.com. If you would like to be spotlighted on the Women on the Rise segment of the BFF Empowerment Podcast, be sure to send us a message to bffempowerment@gmail.com. If you love the show, be sure to leave a review. Reviews really matter. Once I start getting, more reviews on the show, I will start reading those reviews on the air so people can hear, what people think about the show. So leave a review. If you're on Spotify, I don't think you can leave reviews, but you can leave a rating. But if you're on Apple or any other platforms that you're able to leave a review, reviews matter. I want this podcast to grow. I want this to reach people. So please do your part, share, subscribe, follow, do what you need to do to make sure BFF Empowerment Podcast, continues. Um, and I will see you guys later. Thank you so much for listening.